Welcome, everyone, to another episode of No Bull, Just Bacon. I'm your host, Dr. Allan, and with me here today, chewing on Halloween candy, is Coach Beth to answer all of your burning health and fitness questions from around the social media world. This is a rapid fire episode on a holiday. We've got a ton of great topics to cover. Let's get rolling. We're going to get out of here a little bit early, but we were going to cover some really good things for you first. You've talked about body fat percentage ranges heading into cuts and builds. What's the best way to estimate where we are to determine how to proceed with goals? You mentioned that the measurement methods are not accurate at all. And in fact, if you guys have not checked it out, my Instagram post today goes over why in body, Hume, those scales that you stand on, none of them tell you anything even remotely close to what you actually are. And the error is so much you cannot use it to tell progress. That's a good reference for you there. But we have said in the past, and this person is referencing, that pictures are the way to do it, but she finds progress pictures unhelpful. Do you think ChatGPT could estimate based on uploaded photos? No, I absolutely do not think that ChatGPT can. In fact, I've tested it and it can't. If you don't know how to do this, the measurement methods that you pay for, like InBody and all those things, don't really work. What do? Well, I'm sorry to say that's when you contact a coach. I mean, for the people in our Mighty Networks group, you could certainly post up a picture in the group and ask. For any of our clients, you can email them to us. For everybody else, you either figure it out as best as you possibly can on your own, potentially get a coach. I mean, you can even drop it in our Facebook group, and I'm happy to help you there. But unfortunately, ChatGPT cannot do this type of thing for you. It's very, very inaccurate. In a similar manner, I've seen and heard of people who are having horrible results using ChatGPT to tell them what calories are in their food, and
Oh
it
my
is
God.
in no way accurate. It cannot do that. Remember, ChatGPT is not artificial intelligence. It is a dredging bot. Therefore, what it does is it pulls from around the internet and in many cases finds the most popular answer for something. And that does not necessarily mean it's the right answer because the vast majority of people don't know health, fitness, and nutrition. So the thing that gets parroted the most is questionable at best. So when you're trying to figure out body fat percentages to be able to identify where you want to go, if you can't figure it out on your own, contact a coach. That's what they're there for. That's how they'll help you out. It's kind of like saying, hey, I've got a question about my car. How do I figure it out? Well, you go to a mechanic. They're
Just
the ones
ask
that
the
do.
internet.
Yeah,
What could go wrong?
just ask the internet. Ask somebody who knows what they're doing. And yeah, I mean, there's a reason that you get a coach because it can help you out so much there. Do you track veggies in a cut or in general? I loosely track them, but I'm wondering if I should be more precise and more accurate. The way that Beth and I work is that if it's a fibrous or leafy green veggie, with a few exceptions, we do not have you track in most cases. I mean, we'll say have a cup as a serving of veggies. Don't really worry about it that much because any of the differences that you have in that measurement is very small from a calorie perspective. Now, the other things that we do add to that are carrots,
Corn.
cauliflower if you want. Are there any others that I'm missing there, Beth?
Corn, depending on if somebody considers that a vegetable.
I would, well, no, I would measure corn
Yeah.
because of how high it is. But carrots, I wouldn't bother measuring. I would still just use that cup measurement as a serving at a
Yeah.
meal and not even worry about it. Cauliflower, I
Let's put
wouldn't
it
worry
let's
about.
put it this way. You're not losing weight because you're eating too many vegetables. Unless you're coating them in butter and oil or like frying them, um, you're not meeting your goals because you're not religiously tracking every vegetable that goes into your mouth. So,
Starchy carbs are the one that can get away from people. I mean,
yeah.
like rice, peas, corn
Yeah,
can
but
add
rice,
up.
like you'd be tracking, you should be tracking. Like rice isn't a vegetable.
Right. Well, it's a starchy carb that I kind of throw in with those starchy vegetables. And so it's a grain for sure. But corn and peas are the two that kind of stick out to me that people can put a dent in their calorie allotments with
If you're like
those.
a super small woman who has no wiggle room in her calories, I would say yes. But otherwise, this is one of those areas where I think micromanaging this is not prudent, especially since we're talking about fucking vegetables here. So, like in my cut right now, I'm My big ass salad that I have at the end of the day, I am tracking some of the vegetables in that because I know that they are going to bump my fiber content up a little bit. So I do track my like bell peppers and that kind of thing, but I don't like everything else that goes in there, like tomatoes, cucumbers, onions.
Yeah, and that's not for a calorie content that you're tracking it for, though.
No, I'm
You're
tracking it
keeping an
for
eye
the
on
fiber
fiber. Yeah, and
content.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's important that people keep an eye on that type of thing. But to be precise and accurate from a calorie perspective, yeah, I mean there are some vegetables that and fruits that certainly you should be tracking. And I say fruits because I was kind of thinking like avocado people think of as a vegetable, even though it's a fruit. You should certainly be tracking that because that adds up really quickly.
I mean, it's
Olives,
fat.
yeah, yeah. And so there are certain ones, but those fibrous and leafy green ones tend to be so calorie devoid that
Yeah.
that's something that I wouldn't worry about. What else, the other things that Beth said that were really smart are bell peppers, onions, tomatoes to a large extent are not really problematic. Carrots, people always think that carrots, for some reason, it is general knowledge that carrots are these really bad things to eat and they have all these calories. They don't have any calories in them.
My
People are like,
God.
well, it's all from sugar. I mean,
Oy.
it there's very little calorie. Like try to eat 100 calories of carrots, and you're like, hey, that's a pretty decent serving. It's really hard to overeat things, and I think baby carrots are one of the best things that you can turn to if you're having issues with constantly dealing with hunger. I mean, those pickles, all the things that Beth had mentioned, broccoli, cauliflower. I mean, all these different things that are so low in calorie content and so high in volume are really good to reach towards. So would I count all these things? No, outside of a select few. And that kind of depends, are you making them like a large side of your main meal? And I can see that happening with peas. I can see that happening with corn, with the way that people eat corn at certain times. But, you know, starchy type of things like grains, roots, tubers, potatoes can add up, although they're a good choice for volume, but that's something that I would still track. Um, Beans, I would track. Um, but those leafy fibrous greens, I wouldn't have an issue not tracking those. And if that makes your life a lot easier, then I would certainly lean into that as much as possible. All right. Can you mess up your metabolism with on-off dieting? We've talked about metabolic damage before and how that's not really a thing. Can you mess up your metabolism with on-off dieting? Yes, but not in the way that you think. And the reason that I say yes is because people that consistently do this on-off dieting, they're constantly cycling, okay, well, I need to go into a diet because I've gained so much weight. And this happens a lot around holiday periods. It's essentially like a binge and purge process, a binge and restrict process, rather. Um, and they'll eat tons of food and they'll say, okay, well, I need to go on a diet as essentially a punishment for something that they've eaten. Does this mess up your metabolism? Not directly, but it can over time if you're consistently doing this. And in those periods where you're restricting a significant amount because I see people really overcorrect in these instances. We will often see periods where they're doing this for 2 or 3 months until they get back into old habits and then just say, fuck it, and go back to eating the way that they were before. It's so restricted during those periods that there's actually muscle loss from extreme low calorie diets for, month 2, 3 in a row. And so will that mess up your metabolism? Yes. And this is one of the big concerns with things like GLP-1s. For people that are indicated for the GLP-1, the benefits certainly outweigh the risks. For those people that only have like 20 pounds to lose, this is one of the risks that you fall into with getting on something that essentially causes potentially starvation if you're using it wrong. And if you're a person that only has so many pounds to lose and you're not technically in that like 30 BMI or higher range, with no muscle, um, the risks are there that you're not going to be eating enough to maintain lean muscle mass levels. And then each time you do that, you lower your metabolic rate effectively. Your basal metabolic rate, your resting metabolic rate goes down. And so for those people, and we're seeing this a lot right now, there are people that are getting on it for 2 or 3 months in a row. losing 15 or 20 pounds, getting off of it because they don't plan on being on this for the rest of their life because they're probably not indicated for it. And then they eat their way back up to the weight that they were before. And then they get on it and they do it. But each time they do that, they're lowering their resting metabolic rate um, for each subsequent attempt. And so their health is getting worse and worse and worse over time by doing this. And that's why what's really important over these time periods that you are losing body fat and losing weight intentionally, you're learning how to do it through proper habits. You're learning how to have a proper weight training program in place. You're actually picking the right foods and not just starving yourself into thinness. Because there's a difference between eating in a healthy manner and just starving yourself down on the scale. And so I think that a lot of people don't really realize that these are two completely different things. And losing 10 pounds for one person and losing 10 pounds for another person can be completely different health outcomes. Even though in that short term, the person's just super happy, okay, well, I lost that 10 pounds, and that's all that matters, because unfortunately, that's what ends up happening with people as like a sign of success. They'll view just losing the weight as the important thing without realizing that maybe they're setting up bad eating habits. Maybe it's even a form of disordered eating with the way that they're choosing to do this. And then they're making life harder and harder over time by having these, binge and restrict cycles. Um, Anything else you can think of there, Beth? I think that kind of covers that pretty
No,
decently.
I mean, a lot of people just don't understand the metabolic impact of losing muscle over time. And that's really what it comes down to. Because to your point, usually what happens in these scenarios is people are overcorrecting. So they're like literally trying to starve themselves, and they just catabolize all of their metabolically active tissue when they do that. And that's what gets you over time is losing that muscle. It's not necessarily the fact that you've been dieting in a calorie deficit. It's that you've dieted all of your metabolically active tissue away.
Yeah, and if you want to be on the diet roller coaster for the rest of your life, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people want that immediate gratification so much that they don't view that as what they're doing. They're
Yeah.
just super happy. Oh, I lost the 10 or 15 pounds. But how many times have you talked with Deborah from the cul-de-sac and she's like, I did this diet and I lost
Yeah.
15 pounds. And then literally 3 or 4 months later, she's back to where she began. And she's
If not
always in
more.
this. Yeah. And she's
If
always
not
in this.
more.
Well, it's
Usually
really,
people like usually people when people do stuff like this, they actually gain more weight back than from when they eventually started, which is also problematic from a metabolic standpoint.
well, and even if they gain the same amount of weight back, that shift in body composition is really problematic because they come back like if you were at 175 pounds, you get down to 150, you're super happy, then you go back up to 175 pounds. Well, you might be 175 pounds again, but you're 175 pounds with more body fat
Yeah.
at that level. And that's really problematic because, there's a big debate in health about set point, settling point, dual intervention point theory. There is a gravastat in the human body. Our body has an internal mechanism that says, I want to be about this weight. It's really good at preventing weight loss because if you think about things from an evolutionary perspective, if you were losing weight particularly too quickly, that was a bad thing. You were starving, you were going to die. And so your body fights weight loss a lot more than it fights weight gain. There are certain people that their gravastat does fight weight gain, but it's the exception rather than the rule. Those people that like when they start to gain weight and they like food makes them nauseous, that is it working in the opposite direction. But that's the exception. Most people can gain weight without too much of a problem. And, evolutionarily, that actually makes sense because having some extra body fat was historically always a good sign because it gave you some stores to pull from when food became scarce. The problem with now is that this food's not scarce. And so, your body is going to want to shift back up in weight. If you had been a heavy weight for a long period of time and you use, drugs or starvation diets or whatever it is to get down, if you start eating intuitively again, your body's going to want to go back up to that weight. And unfortunately, if you've done these extreme type of diets to get down there, might have felt great while you were doing it. And your bloods will even improve if you've got a lot of weight to lose. And so you'll think, okay, well, I'm getting healthier without realizing you're setting yourself up for challenges in the future that maybe you don't even realize that you're doing. So be very conscious of these extreme eating practices, of all these other things that could be making your life harder in the long term, realize that there's a reason that a lot of coaches say slow and steady. And I realize that there is research out there that suggests that some quicker weight loss can be motivating for a lot of people. But in those quick weight loss scenarios, you have to be very regimented in the way that you eat. You have to be very regimented in the way that you train, and you probably are going to have to put your protein intakes up much higher than you are comfortable
Yeah.
with. I mean,
I'm
that's
thinking
how
of
they do that.
I'm thinking of the rapid fat loss protocols and stuff like that, and they do work,
Well, it's
but
protein sparing modified fast is
protein,
what it was,
yes.
the generic
Yeah.
term
And
for it.
it's like, but it's miserable. It's a miserable existence. I've had friends who have done this at like as like a means to like crash diet before a vacation or like a photo shoot or something like that. And
And it
it
works.
works.
It works.
They are
Yeah.
like they are on lockdown for
Mhm.
that whole time that they're doing that because you have to be. Like you cannot go out to eat. You cannot do anything and your calories are so low that like you barely have the energy to work out. Like it's a miserable existence.
Well, and your
Like
protein is well above 1 gram per
yes.
pound of body weight.
Yes.
And when we're talking about having lower calories plus protein that high, you're basically mainly eating protein.
Yep.
And you're eating
Yeah.
enough fat for health purposes. Your carbs are very low. You're eating a lot of protein. There are ways to do these fat loss programs quickly. It's
Yeah.
just nobody's willing to do it. Like if you tell people, "Hey, we can do this quickly," and all that, they're like, "Okay, good. That's what I want." And you're like, "Well, here's what you have to do to get there." And they're like, "Oh, I'm not doing that." So it's wonderful that it works on paper, and it's wonderful that researchers can say, "Hey, look, you can lose weight fast and you can do it in a healthy manner," but it becomes very, very restrictive to do it in the way that it works. And so for most people, that's why you hear so many coaches say, "Hey, get into a modest rate of loss. Let's learn how to do this along the way." Because the really nice thing about doing it a little bit more slowly, as fast as possible within a healthy manner, but a little bit more slowly, is that you're able to adjust to different eating patterns. You're learning to eat in a different way. You're able to manage, emotions and stress and all those different types of things. You're able to manage hunger signaling. When you do these protein sparing modified fasts, fuck your hunger. Doesn't matter. You're going to be hungry,
You're gonna be
really hungry.
starving.
You're going to be
And that
really
that's
hungry.
usually what I've heard from my friends who have done this is that they're just like crawling up the walls with hunger. And if you want to talk about like binge and purge cycles, like something like this, where your hunger is that high, when you come off of something like this, the equal and opposite reaction is almost always exclusively going to be to start binge eating.
Well,
And this that
psychologically, you felt so restricted.
yes, I really have problems with protocols like this for that reason because of what they create.
Yeah.
You're like the human biology, like you're gonna go 180 degrees in the opposite direction when you finish something like that. It's just like bodybuilders for contest prep. Like usually after your contest prep is over, because you are quite literally starving by the end of a prep, like the reaction to that is to start to over consume and overeat calories. And it's almost like an out of body experience. Like you cannot stop yourself from eating once that trigger is released. It's very difficult to kind of rein that back unless you're prepared for it ahead of time. So it's stuff like this. I just like I have such a moral issue with it because of what I know it can create as an after effect.
I don't mind these as like short-term solutions to certain things. And I've had some I've put some people on protein sparing modified fast, but the only people that I've put on them have been very accepting of what the downsides to it would be. Like
Yeah.
I'll have a person that'll be like, "Hey, my wedding's in 2 months." And I'll be like, "You should have contacted me like 4 months ago." So like we're like, okay, well, what can we do? But then a person has the motivation to do it.
Right.
And we have a very distinct conversation about how we're going to bring them back to eating afterwards because
Yes,
it's super
that's the
important.
key. That
Yeah.
really is the key is having a plan in place. Like once you've reached your goal, like you
It
have to
doesn't
have
just
some
end.
you have to have some aftercare there.
Yeah,
Like
you have another two
you
or
have
three
to have a
months of
way
being
to
on a
like
diet.
yeah, to like bring your calories back up without sort of triggering that binge desire in the back of the brain. And you do have to have a plan carefully laid out for that for sure.
Yeah. All right, next question. When losing body fat, does it really matter if I lift heavy since I'm not building muscle? Yes, absolutely. There is no point in your lifting life where you don't lift heavy. And by
What
lifting
builds it
heavy,
keeps it.
yeah, well, what I'm saying when we say lift heavy is lifting in proximity to failure. It doesn't matter if you're doing 20 reps, it doesn't matter if you're
Yeah.
doing 3 reps. It's gonna fucking hurt by that last rep.
Yeah.
And it needs to, in the discomfort sense, not in the like I'm actually damaging myself sense. And the more experience that you get, the more you get to realize that difference. It's not like an acute stabbing pain, it's more like a deep down soreness. But um it's it's really important when you're cutting. Maybe you're not building lean muscle during that period, depending on how severe your cut is and your genetics. But it's really important because that's how you maintain the lean muscle mass. And you can technically improve strength during a cut pretty well as long as it's a modest deficit. But yeah, I mean, you don't want to be like, okay, well, I can let the gas off now because I'm in a cut. It's similar to people who go into calorie maintenance or a slight calorie surplus. And they're like, well, if I'm not cutting, then I don't really need to take care of my nutrition. It doesn't matter. I see that literally with 75% of the people that I work with the first time that we get out of a cut and we switch into either a maintenance phase, which people think doesn't do anything, which is 100% false, or we switch into a slight surplus. All of a sudden, all of that regimented adherence and consistency that they have just falls off. And it happens nearly every time. Like I
Yep.
said, it's about 75% of people. The second that they're not in a cut, they think nutrition no longer matters
Which is
because,
crazy because like
yeah,
it becomes even more important when you're in maintenance because now if you're not in a deficit, if you're fucking around, you're kicking yourself into a surplus instead of when you're at a deficit, you might just kind of hit it maintenance for a little bit. You're gonna start to see that scale creep if you mess around too much in maintenance. Like if anything, you
yeah.
should be more
Well, so
adherent.
yeah, I mean, when you're at a point where you have potentially an energy surplus, you're going to start laying down body fat, right?
Hmm.
And so the more you go off the rails when you're above a calorie deficit, the more of a chance that you have of adding body fat unintentionally. And so, yeah, I mean, it becomes important to really keep an eye on that type of thing. And so it's, people just view it as everybody does. They view it as, well, if I'm not cutting, I'm not doing anything. And it's like, Jesus Christ. This is why we're constantly in that diet roller coaster because you view everything as not doing anything unless you're cutting. And so you're making your life really hard in all of the times that you're not cutting. And then you complain about how hard cutting is and then you go back to make it much harder the next time that you cut. It's this cycle that people get into because this mental viewpoint of I'm not doing anything if I'm not cutting is absolutely batshit crazy, and it's wild that people get into that. So yes, lifting is important at all times. The only time that I would tell people you're not going to be lifting heavy or lifting in proximity to failure is when you have injury status in play. And so if you've got a nagging injury, no, you're not going to be taking things within proximity to failure. You're not going to be like 0, 1, 2 RIR reps in reserve at that point. No, you're going to be whatever your body can handle for whatever that joint or muscle is that's got the nagging injury. But outside of injury status, and this is a conversation that we've gotten into before where I'll have some people, they're generally 60 and older, not to stigmatize people, but at like 60 and older, people all of a sudden say, hey, I just want to maintain. I don't necessarily want to build anymore, therefore I can let off the gas. And the answer is no, that's not true either, because you're going to need to do what you can do to, bank as much of that lean muscle and health as possible when you can. And so this is always a really nice thing from a personal challenge perspective because you always have something to work towards. Um, so always do the best that you can because you're never going to get too muscular. It's impossible. If you're a natural athlete and you're not on massive amounts of steroids, it's just not going to happen. And that age-old analogy of it's like worrying that like when you get your driver's license, all of a sudden you're going to become a NASCAR driver. It's just not going to happen. And so you push it as best as you possibly can. You get, you make that gym time worthwhile, and then you reap the benefits later. And the people that let off the gas because I just want to maintain are the people that over time find themselves slipping and then they're not maintaining. And that's where it becomes really problematic. And trying to build that lean muscle back, trying to build that health back in our later years is infinitely more difficult than building it today. So, you're never going to be younger than you are today. Do what you can today to bulletproof yourself in the future. And so you're always going to be lifting heavy outside of your first 3, 4, 5 months, when you're getting form down, your body's adapting outside of, an injury status type of thing. Yeah, you're always really going to be pushing it. Doesn't matter whether you're in a cut or a build. Do you need to hit 2.5 grams of leucine as the threshold each meal to maximize muscle growth? This is an interesting question because about 2.5 grams of leucine, which is an amino acid in protein, is necessary to maximize muscle protein synthesis in a single meal. That doesn't mean that having less doesn't also upregulate muscle protein synthesis that can be beneficial. That just means if you want to maximize it, it's at that level or higher. Um, do you need to hit it to maximize muscle growth? You probably need to hit it at least a couple times a day. When you're trying to maximize lean muscle building um, in a calorie maintenance or slightly above, probably having 3 main meals or 4 main meals spread apart that have that is probably good. Snacks, it doesn't really matter. I wouldn't worry about that in between. If you're doing 25 or 30 grams of protein at once, that's what's shown to make most people have that 2.5 grams of leucine to be able to do this. So plan it at your main meals. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, 25 to 30 grams of protein or more. And then knock out the rest of your protein however is most convenient for you. And if I say that, if we're saying, hey, 30 grams of protein 3 times a day, that's 90 grams of protein. And that's pretty much what everybody would need to start to get into the right range. Bigger guys would certainly need more, but this is where all of a sudden life becomes a lot easier because you're not trying to fit 100 grams into one meal. So spreading this out helps to both keep you in the right nitrogen balance for lean muscle building for a longer part of the day. And it makes it easier as a practice to be able to get in total daily protein intakes. Anything to add to that one, Beth?
Mm-mm.
When doing leg extensions, how should you position your feet? This is one of those things that's a little bit funny. When you're doing this, whatever feels like the best leverage is typically what I would recommend. This is not a biarticulate muscle like the hamstring to where like changing the positioning is going to do a major difference as far as muscle activation goes. So wherever you feel like you have the best leverage is the position that you should be in. For me, I flex my toes up. I would think that pointing my toes would feel really weird and would make it really difficult to get good leverage. Now, remember when we're working the muscle in these non-biarticulated muscles in particular, like the quads, we want to establish maximal mechanical tension. Mechanical tension is what drives the adaptations that cause lean muscle building. So wherever you feel strongest, that is allowing you to do the movement, in good form, is what you should be doing there. Now, people ask about both the foot positioning as well as should I lean back a little bit in the leg extension. There is research that suggests that leaning back a little bit in the seat in the leg extension will more maximally hit the quads. It's true on paper, but again, where do you feel the strongest? Most people would feel stronger leaning back, and that's one of the reasons that the research suggests that yeah, it does allow you to more maximally stimulate that musculature. But for most movements, assuming you're using good form, put yourself in the position that feels the best for you, and it's probably going to produce the best results long term. What is the best way to measure heart rate zone for regular people? Beth, you probably have a better answer for this than I do.
For regular people. So the most accurate way would be if you had a chest strap. So if you have a wearable device that has a chest strap, that's the closest in terms of accuracy. If you don't have one of those, I would not. My watch I have found is kind of hit or miss. Sometimes it actually takes it a little bit to catch up to where I am. So Just as an example, if I'm running sprints, I might notice that my heart rate is lagging behind where I can actually tell my heart rate is. You can do a pulse check. So if you take your pulse for 15 seconds and multiply that by 4, you should get your heart rate. That's probably the easiest way for most folks to do it. If you're talking about zone work and in terms of RPE or effort that you're experiencing, the talk test. So if you can sing the alphabet song, you are in zone 2. If you cannot sing the alphabet song from start to finish, you are higher than zone 2. So the talk test and probably taking your pulse and multiplying it by 4 after 15 seconds are probably the two easiest ways for folks to measure their own heart rate if they don't have a wearable.
Yeah, and I think that that's where I thought you would go with it, the talk test. And I
Mhm.
think that the talk test is probably the right choice for the large majority of people.
Yeah.
You don't need to know that your heart rate is exactly in this zone.
Yeah. And if you're doing like high intensity interval work, like you're going to be experiencing kind of peaks and valleys, and it's not really, you don't really need to know your heart rate for that kind of work. So the only thing that I'm assuming is this person is referring to like their zone 2 work, in which case the talk test is going to be paramount because zone 2 is based on effort. It's not based on an actual like mathematical zone. You shouldn't be hyper fixated on those numbers anyway. You should be fixated on a feeling and your rate of perceived exertion on that anyway.
Yeah, and in those higher zones, you're essentially just going to be pushing yourself to where you can go anyways.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
like, you
like
know,
PR or ER on those higher heart rate zones.
yeah, I mean, it kind of works itself out. So like, you don't really have to like overthink these things.
Yeah,
They kind of work themselves out if you follow these little specifics. Now, here's the thing, like you'll hear about these specific, you need to be at this like HR max, that's more for like people that are trying to be, pro or semi-pro athletes and trying to like, I mean, oftentimes they'll do split times and they'll follow this kind of stuff. It's not really necessary for the large majority of people, certainly not for health. Um, and there's a lot of focus on it in the research because they want specifics, but that doesn't mean that the research, the way that it's done in research, is necessarily the practical way
right.
that is recommended. And I think that people
Because a
really
lot of
need,
that stuff is done in a lot. Like you have to know your VO2 max, and
yeah,
then but that can only, you really can only measure that in a lab.
right.
So if you're that type of person that is after that type of data, you're already in another like
You don't need to be asking this question
you're in
anyways.
another pay scale as
Yeah.
it is. So like this isn't a question that you would even be asking because you would have a team behind you gathering this data for you anyway. Like you'd be in a lab with, the face mask on measuring your VO2 max, and then you would have specific workouts designed to hit certain percentages of those VO2 maxes, and you would definitely be wearing a chest strap if you're one of those people.
hmm Now, you might be following these types of people, and that might be where this question is coming from.
True.
But
Mhm.
understand that it's not a gen pop or like even for me, it's not relevant to me.
I don't measure any of my heart like and with all the running that I do, heart rate is not anything. I'm looking at my
No.
paces. I am not
Yes.
ever looking at my heart rate. I am always looking at my paces. Even my zone 2 work, I'm never. It's just my zone 2 work is written by my coach as easy pace. Should feel easy.
Yeah,
That's what
I'm
it is.
using perceived exertion, and I think that is better than anything else for this.
Yeah.
All right, last question since it is Halloween, and then we are going to get out of here. Are the tests that show food sensitivities valid? I thought this was a good one to end on, particularly when we're running out to eat a whole bunch of candy. No, they're not. Food intolerance tests, food sensitivity tests are bunk tests. They use something called IgM, or they will sometimes term it non-IgE. If it says IgM or non-IgE on a type of test that you're taking, you can just send me the money because you've just wasted it. I would rather just take that from you. There is no benefit to those tests. They are exposure tests. They're not sensitivity tests. And so what pops on those tests, it's hilarious because if you take one of those tests, I guarantee you there's going to be at least 20 things that it says that you're sensitive to. But what it's actually showing is that you've eaten them recently. It doesn't show sensitivity. And so this is something that natural, I'm trying to be political in how I say this. Natural influencers try to force because they can sell the test and they always have a discount code and it's nice that they sell this, or they're a holistic doctor that sells this and they get the money directly. Like this is a way to sell tests. It's not anything that's beneficial for you. If you believe that you have an issue with the food, speak with an allergist and get an IgE test. Because unfortunately, as much as you want these IgM or non-IgE tests to tell you something, they don't. And they have been shown to far more than not create a nocebo effect. It will make you afraid to eat foods that you're perfectly fine eating, and it only showed up because you had eaten it recently. And so I've had clients who will come to me and it's our first they're filling out their intake form. I'm looking at all these different things and they're like, I just learned last week I can't eat chicken. I actually had that one specifically. Eggs show up all the time. Poultry shows up very easily on these
Yeah, it
IgM
does.
tests, very
Yeah.
easily. So any coach that's worked with this, you're constantly telling people you can eat eggs, it's fine. You can eat chicken, it's fine. Um, and so I will often have people be like, well, I can't have chicken in my plan. I'm like, have you eaten chicken before? They're like, yeah. I'm like, do you like chicken? They're like, yeah. I'm like, how old are you? They're like 55. I'm like, have you eaten chicken all your life? They're like, yeah. Never had a problem. Just took a test last week. Tells them that's the problem.
It's because you ate it last
It's
week.
because you ate it last week. It's because it's a common thing you eat. And for anybody that's really interested in seeing the research backing for all these claims, go to themauathletics.com and type in food intolerance testing. I did an entire blog article on this with all the research backing it. And so it can save you a lot of money from these people that are trying to grift you into buying these tests. And I'm sure that a lot of them don't even know that it's a fake test because it sounds good. People are intolerant to certain foods. People have sensitivities to certain foods. These tests don't show them. So speak with an allergist. They can put you on the right path. Um, they can start looking into some other things if it's not a true allergy, but that can help identify certain things. What a lot of times will happen under these conditions is they will, after doing that IgE test, if you don't really find anything, you might do an elimination diet. But the thing with an elimination diet is you slowly add things back in. You don't just eliminate it and then forget about it because then you don't really learn anything. Because when you take out 50 things, it could have been one, it could have been you just had a transient time where you had some GI distress and you were thinking that it was that. Now, here's the really big thing about the elimination diets and bringing things back into play. Your body produces a lot of enzymes to break down foods based on food exposure. Milk is a big one. Gluten is a big one. So, milk, as an example, if you don't have a true lactose intolerance, even people that aren't lactose intolerant will downregulate their production of lactase if you flat out just stop eating dairy. Your body will stop producing that. And so, what happens with these people, I mean, I see this with gluten a lot of times. I see this with lactose a lot of times. With these people that get convinced that they're gluten intolerant or lactose intolerant, they will cut all these different things out at once. And then the first time that they have a pizza, they'll feel wrecked. And it's because their body had downregulated the production of lactase to break down the cheese. And then instead of slowly introducing small amounts of lactose and then allowing your body to start upregulating that enzyme to break it down, they go all out and they have like a bowl of ice cream. And then they're like, yep. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy when in reality, they weren't really lactose intolerant. They just didn't build it up. So that happens with gluten too. And so people will go gluten free and they'll be like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened in my life. And then they'll have some pasta and they'll be like, see, I'm gluten intolerant. And you might not even be gluten intolerant. And in fact, there is research out there that suggests that the large majority of people that claim gluten intolerance are not gluten intolerant
Yeah.
when actually tested. So be very careful about this and be very careful about producing a nocebo effect if you're doing these elimination diets to figure it out. Slowly start to reintegrate these things in modest amounts, then build up. Because if you don't do that, you might be creating a false sense of a food intolerance or a food sensitivity. Now, if you are truly sensitive to foods, things like a low FODMAP diet can be beneficial for many people. So it's not something that's a bad idea to try, but please do it under the direction of a doctor that knows what they're doing, because they can help you. They can prevent you from falling into these pits that a lot of people fall into because they're trying to essentially be their own doctors. And that's problematic because you don't know what you don't know. And that doesn't mean that you're dumb. That means that you have not seen thousands of patients with these issues to learn, how does this look like? What does this look like in practice? How do we do this in a way that we actually learn something, as opposed to just scaring ourselves to scare ourselves? And that's the problem with these food intolerance tests or these food sensitivity tests, is you're essentially creating a situation where you're going to prove to yourself that you have a problem when you likely don't have a problem. So speak with a professional, get this guided in a smart manner so you can actually figure it out, because there's no reason that you need to be losing the ability to eat 20 or 30 different foods when maybe it was one, maybe it was none. And so learning that is very important. Anything else to add to that, Beth?
No, I had a client who just an anecdote here. I had a client who got one of these tests done and she sent me her list of foods and it literally eliminated everything on her meal plan. And I was like, you know why these popped up is because you eat all of these every single day. And she's like, yeah, I want to try something different that doesn't include any of these foods. And it literally became impossible to feed her because and so then we changed all of the foods on her meal plan and then she went and got another test and all the new foods that she was eating popped up and I like used that to be like, see, like there it's literally just testing what you've been exposed to, and by the end of it, like there was nothing that she could eat, and I was like, how is this benefiting you in any
Yeah.
way,
And,
shape
and
or
the
form, other than to make you completely neurotic about what you're eating?
Yeah, these tests create orthorexia. That's what
It
they
was
do.
terrible. It was
Um,
absolutely terrible. Like she literally, I think the only thing that she got down to was like protein powder, like a random like vegan protein powder.
that's good.
And I was like, if you want to subsist on if you want to subsist on nothing but protein shakes, definitely be my guest. But like, this ain't gonna work. Like, this is not you're going to be malnourished if you do
Yeah,
this.
yeah. And unfortunately, for people that have this fear of this type of thing, this can be the worst experience that you ever
Yeah.
go through, because it makes the fear worse. It actually worsens this disorder, because this is a bit of a disorder.
Yep.
And it worsens this disorder because it almost feels like it proves to you that everything
Yeah.
that you worried about before was true,
Yep.
when the chances are it's not. And so that's why, for all of these different tests, her testing, like we talk about all these different bunk tests all the time. These food intolerance tests, the Dutch test, all of those other kinds of tests that people are trying to sell you. The tests for parasites, the tests for, like, there's all these bullshit tests that are being sold right now, and it's because you make a lot of money doing it. And so it's not promoting health for people. It's causing neuroticism. It's causing orthorexia. It's causing really bad disordered eating. And we're going to continue talking out against these things. And we're very happy to share the research. But, if someone's trying to sell you a test that seems out of the norm, I mean, if someone tells you to take a CBC, please get the CBC. But, like, if someone's telling you to take what's essentially a fringe test, like the Dutch test, like these parasite tests for when you don't really have any signs of parasites, like these food intolerance tests, ask to see proof, and then feel free to shoot it our way, because I have no problem breaking these things down so people can better understand what they might be putting themselves through. All right, guys. This is the end of the episode for today. Happy Halloween to everybody. I hope everybody is safe tonight. Make sure that you enjoy a little bit of candy within a moderated amount to make yourself feel good. And certainly reach out to us if you have any questions. Instagram, Facebook, Mighty Networks, YouTube. We're happy to answer them in upcoming shows. We will see you next time.